please. Please stand and join me in the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for a moment of silence. Thank you very much. Please silence cell phones, pagers, electronic items like that. Kind of refreshing to hear so many voices help me with the pledge there. Item number 1 is citizen concerns. Do we have anybody that wishes to address the board on an item that is not already on the agenda? Please come up to the podium and state your name.
My name's Luke Wyant. I reside at 5901 Stone Avenue, and I don't believe the Stone Avenue project is on here.
It is not.
I don't know if you guys are aware that they tore up Stone Avenue, 7, maybe 8 weeks ago. So they started with one half of the road torn up because it was culvert failure. And then we drove over the other half for a week. And then from me talking to some of the guys that I know that work for the county, it was an engineer's decision to tear up the entire road. I get mail about once a week, if I'm lucky now. So first 2 weeks, they didn't even bother picking up trash. I guess I need to, is there anything that, it's definitely a concern in the neighborhood. I didn't know if there was, even if we can get gravel on the half of the road where we don't, right now, our only way is to go out and around, and that is small concern. Either go out and around to Buchanan and down Correctionville, or take Highway 20 off Buchanan. And that's all small, that's all pennies compared to not getting mail. And,
Right.
But it's been weeks.
I understand, and the knowledge that I'll give you at the moment is that is having to be a custom-made or sized culvert, last I understood. And the last time I talked to the county engineer, he was telling me that in the neighborhood of another 2 to 3 weeks at the time. So I don't know, I haven't checked on the progress of that. As far as your mail and disposal services, I have no control over that, and I sympathize with you. I know that road well, but.
And there's no way to put a temporary, even if they just fill it with gravel in that spot so we can get local traffic.
I don't know. I've not been out there since I knew it was closed, but.
When they cut it, they told us 2 to 3 weeks, and then, oh wait, we don't have a part after you rip up the good half of the road, 2 to 3 weeks. I guess I'm just asking if you look into it.
No, and I don't see my county engineer here tonight, so I will talk to him in the morning and try and get a better answer. But if you would like to leave your phone number with Karen here, okay, I'll do my best to call you back.
Just for a concern, I know you guys are busy, but at the same time, I just wanted it to be discussed, or so you knew. So
understood.
You guys knew, instead of just get phone call after phone call. So I'm sure you get plenty of complaints, so I don't need to be one of them. So that's all I had. So,
Mr. Wyant, thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Understood, thank you. Any other citizen concerns to address anything that's not on the agenda? Item number 2, approval of the agenda.
Move it. Second.
Motion by Monson, second by Radig. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Items 3 through 11 constitute a consent agenda of routine action items to be considered by one motion. Items pass unanimously unless a separate vote is requested by a board member. Item 3 is approval of the minutes of the May 25th meeting. Item 4 is approval of claims. 5, board administration, approval of notice of property sale resolution for parcel known as 1417 Grandview Boulevard for Tuesday, June 5th at 4:35 p.m. Item 6, juvenile detention. Received juvenile detention's April population report. Item 7, A, approval of memorandum of personnel transactions. B, authorization to initiate hiring process. 8, County Auditor received the appointment of John Nelson to the City of Lawton City Council. 9, County Treasurer, approval of resolution naming depositories. Item 10 is Board Administration, approval of engagement letter from Piper Sandler and Company for road improvement projects. Item 11 is Board Administration, approval of resolution of tax suspension for initials PO. And B is approval of resolution for a tax suspension for initials PR. Do we have any individual concerns on any item of the consent agenda? I will move approval of consent agenda.
Second.
Motion by DeWitt, second by Radig. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Excuse me. Item 12, Community and Economic Development, approval of Simcoe member dues for rural cities proposal.
Good evening, David Gleiser, Director of Community Economic Development. This is sort of becoming an annual routine agenda item for the county. This is going to be the 6th fiscal year that we've made a request to use local option sales tax to pay for half of the membership dues for our rural communities in Woodbury County. This has really been a benefit to all of Woodbury County. In the last 5 fiscal years, we have spent roughly $28,000 and have received a net benefit in excess of over $400,000 of direct and indirect work with Simcoe staff and our communities, city clerks, city councils, et cetera. And during that time, we've acquired $4.29 million in additional grants. So the $28,000 that we leveraged has paid dividends. Michelle Bostonellis, the executive director from Simcoe, is here. I'll let her talk a little bit about the work that they've been doing with their communities this last year, but the staff recommendation is to ask the board to allocate the $7,279, which would pay for all of our rural communities, 50% of those dues. Communities that don't accept the offer will come back and deobligate those funds first week in August. But considering, we're coming out of the pandemic, these city clerks are just swamped with a lot of paperwork and need help with grant administering and so forth. So I'll go ahead and let Michelle talk a little bit about Simcoe and take it from there.
Seems like there's more grants available than ever right now, too.
There is a lot of grant, or it's coming at us pretty soon. Yeah, I started trying to think about the type of work that we've been doing the most of. It seems like most of the community grant writing really kind of is the thing that they want to do. So it's either researching grants, writing the grant administration. Some of the CDBG work that we did, like for example, Correctionville, we had to do some income qualifications, some environmental work before you could even apply for the grant, so some of those are that prep work. There's grants like also, Correctionville's on my head. Also in Correctionville, they received the Iowa DOT Transportation Alternative Program grant and needed some help through the steps, especially when you're talking federal money. The process gets kind of complicated, so we can help them work through that. But so there's lots of either grant writing, grant research. Sometimes it's just a call that we get of who do we call, what should we do, what are our resources. We're doing some walk audits in Mobile and Lawton. In Sergeant Bluff, we're doing a program right now with Siouxland District Health and the Iowa Department of Public Health, so that's a good project. We're also using some of our CARES Act money in Sergeant Bluff to do a senior services study. We, have housing projects going on. It kind of just varies, I think, in the communities. I have noticed, though, I think the communities that come to us and want to do something are the ones that are always the most successful. The ones kind of I drag along, sometimes they have to want to do it. Does that make sense? So they have to want to apply for the grant and go after it. It just works a lot better there. But so, we reach out to them quarterly, try to see what's going on, but most of all, they mostly just call us. Also, with their membership to Simcoe, gives them a spot on the board of directors. And so that's a great opportunity for the communities to get to know the region, get to know their neighbors. There's something in the networking to be able to come together and talk about what's going on. So that provides them those opportunities. Plus, we have some other things that we do. We do legislative activities. We do usually some programming in terms of training or whatnot through the year, so they get to participate in that as well, which I think is a great opportunity for them. And then with the American Rescue Plan funding coming out, we're already kind of getting some questions on that. And so we're anticipating that the communities are going to be asking us for some help, either in the administration or the paperwork and whatnot, so we'll be able to assist with that. So I think it's been a good partnership, and I hope you continue it, but I can answer any specific questions that you might have.
So last week I did this, not on this particular subject. I think we're all going to approve this, but I brought up the water trail application. Who was it? What's the other cog that you're?
Yep, just north of us, out of Spencer, Northwest Regional Planning
Okay.
District, yeah. So
I just couldn't think of the name, and I didn't dig.
yeah, we all have these long acronyms, right? So the one up in Spencer, Northwest. So we have talked to them, and it looks like the region is interested in submitting an application. So my understanding is the pre-app is due in October, and so that's something that we would start working on this summer. Yeah.
I was around in 2015 when we started this, and it's been, I think, a godsend for the communities. We thought a lot about how we could provide services to them through the 1-cent sales tax that would allow them to do the things they need to do. And if they're willing to do it, they can make a world of difference. I know there's a community south of here that had sewer and water problems that were beyond repair, and they finally asked for help, and they're in good shape now. Blanco.
Right, yep. A lot of times it just takes a phone call to kind of say, hey, we need some help, what can you help us? And, sometimes it's just, like David says, the clerk is there, and sometimes it's just having that other resource, someone to call, someone to bounce ideas off of, what are our options to get things moving that we can provide. Yeah.
Any other questions for Michelle or Mr. Gleiser?
I'll move the approval of the member dues.
Second?
Motion by Radig, second by Monson. Any further discussion or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you. David, you're going to start eating more.
Item 13, discussion of allocating $10 million of the 2021 fiscal recovery funds, also known as ARPA, and up to $5.5 million of the 2022 fiscal recovery funds to the Woodbury County Law Enforcement Center Authority. This is an information item. Kenny.
Kenny Schmidt, Building Services Director. On May 20th, the Woodbury County Authority opened bids for construction on the new LEC proposed building. The lowest construction bid was $58.3 million, and our original pre-bid estimates were $43 million, which is a 36% increase. The impact is directly related to COVID-19. Materials and labor is where most of that increase comes from. So it was apparent for several reasons to study what funding sources that we could find to offset those costs. Some of those could be the American Rescue Plan, local fiscal recovery. They continue to change the guidelines on what those funds can be utilized for, and they continue to identify areas where you can and where you can't use those. Those are pretty fluid. We also believe that there's some other areas that we provided in your backup materials that could be possible funding sources. Things like project value engineering that we try to do on every project that we have. Dennis is working on bond premiums to try to identify some funds there. And we also have city contributions that were identified earlier on. One important thing I do want to point out, that Goldberg Group Architects and Baker Group both came to the authority and offered to change or amend their current contracts for the project from a percentage-based fee to a fixed fee. The authority accepted those amendments, and that is a possible savings of $1.55 million, which is huge.
Do we get that in writing?
Absolutely, it's in contract. So, you know, that's a possible savings. What that does is limits either of those two groups from charging an upcharge or an increase, basically due to those COVID increases, and fixes their fees. I'd like to invite either our chairman, Ron Wick, or Dan Moore, if he'd like to, and Shane Albrecht with the Baker Group to now come up and talk about project costs, funding, and some of the latest updates that they've come up with.
As an aside, so that everybody knows, I am on the Law Enforcement Center Authority as well as Mr. Wick and Mr. Moore, but I also sit on the Board of Supervisors. So there was public notice that all of these entities would be here and represented in a legal meeting. So just so everybody understands that some of the complications we're going through tonight, and not to mention all the pressure from interested parties, but regardless, I will defer back to Shane or whoever needs to speak.
You've met the open meeting laws, yes. Shane, thank you.
Shane Albrecht, Baker Group. The very first thing I'd like to ask, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to present this document to you and ask if you would receive this into the records. This document is a document that I worked with Dennis on to provide, and Kenny and others to provide, that we submitted to Joni Ernst's office for our arguments on why this money should be used. So I would like to present this document so that the board could have it in their official record.
Please. I move to receive this
Second.
document. Who
I seconded. Keith?
Motion by DeWitt, second by Radig, to receive this from Shane Albrecht from Baker Group. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Thank you. Sir.
We also did submit this to Senator Grassley and Representative Feenstra.
Okay.
So we notified three officers, told this is of immediate importance, we need some answers, because it affects the whole project.
We should probably also notify Treasury, Department of Treasury.
Well, we're hoping they can get to them faster than we can.
That is something that we have till July 17th to submit that as part of our case to them as well. They gave us a deadline of a time frame to submit that to them, and they said they would listen to it and offer an opinion as well. What Kenny said is pretty much true. You guys have all seen the backup stuff of the different choices of funds to be able to use to be able to do this. This isn't picking anything other than just giving the authority the ability to move forward. So is there any questions anybody has for me while I'm here? I think Kenny did a good job explaining that whole piece, so.
So I guess, you know, for the record, to be clear, I mean, one thing we discussed in planning this project is the failing air handling unit and, you know, the need to update that one way or another. And I think this project will directly address air quality as well as medical staff within the jail facility. And to me, this alone, if we addressed it over across the street or we did this as a standalone part of the project, that would qualify for that 10 million or even 15 million of that project price.
So right now, one of the things that we've also worked on is a second argument here, because one of the things it looks like, again, there's nothing official on it yet, it looks like you also can target after mental health. There has been a submittal to Joni Ernst's office as well as Grassley's and Feenstra's office about different cases that say up to 44% of the people that are in the jail have some mental health needs. So the new jail with its new increased mental health, there's a formula that's on this handout that I provided you. That handout just basically counted the people that were right there up front. If you stretch that out to the 44%, it's 179. It would be 179 inmates of the 448. And that should have qualified for you for up to $17 million then toward mental health. If I change that number that's on the left from 50 to 179, it changes the 4.5 million to over 17 million. So there's not just an argument, there's a number of different arguments that we're trying right now.
Well, this also benefits the federal government in many ways by having a new facility in this region. We'll probably have the most inmates there of anybody, so at some point.
Anything else?
Anyone?
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Ernie Colt, 4526 Perry Way. I don't know if you've all gotten a chance to read some of this about the fact sheet for the COVID dollars. Look at paragraph 6.
I'll just hand them down, Ernie.
I didn't bring them up for everybody.
That's all right.
Oh, wait a minute, I got two.
Okay, so as I said, we started this bond referendum a couple years ago. That's $50.3 million of Woodbury County taxpayers' money. We chose to give part of this project to the architect out of St. Joe, Missouri. We chose to pick Baker Group out of Des Moines for a project manager because they said they had local ties here. We had meetings that had guys here that have people that still live here, relatives of theirs, and the one guy grew up here, and so they have local ties, okay? So we award them the project manager, and then we turn around and we give Poly Jail to set the steel cells out of Georgia, give those guys the job. And then the electronics and security people, I don't know where they're from, down south somewhere. So now we're talking more dollars that have gone out of state and out of the county. Now we're talking about trying to bring these COVID dollars in, $20 million that's designated to Woodbury County to use in Woodbury County. And for why? To send out of state somewhere? To send some of those dollars out of state? I don't know about me, about a lot of you guys, but I worked hard for a lot of those tax dollars that are being spent, and we all have. And we'd all like to see all of our tax dollars reinvested right here into our own economy. Not in Des Moines, not Lincoln, not Omaha, right here in Woodbury County, Sioux City, Iowa. Paragraph 6 says the treasurer, the last paragraph, paragraph 6. Treasurer's interim final rule also encourages recipients of the COVID dollars to ensure that water, sewer, and broadband projects use strong labor standards, including project labor agreements and community benefits agreements that offer wages at or above prevailing rate and include local hire provisions. Okay? So we're all for allotting some of these dollars, and it's sad that we got to give so many of those dollars to this project, but we're willing to do that if we have the local provisions stipulated in that grant, in the authorization to use those COVID dollars.
Is there a source for this document?
Federal government,
Okay,
came right from them.
the website or,
Right from Washington DC is all I know, man.
okay.
Matthew, just to answer your question, that's part of, I think that's listed, there's a 151-page document that's called the interim rule. I'm pretty sure
Okay.
that's part of that interim rule.
I was gonna print the whole thing out for all of you, but
So there's a 151-page document that's part of, it's called the interim rule. So
Okay.
that's all.
Thank you.
I'll move to receive these.
Second.
Motion by DeWitt, second by Young. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Thank you. Mr. Wick or Mr. Moore, would you like to address anything? I mean, we're at the point where,
I would just say that I think it's pretty well been covered. We're, from an authority standpoint, we're ready to move forward on this, and obviously, we need your assistance. So please, if there are any further questions, if we do get some information back that Dennis has done, possibly that'll give you some additional support there, but I don't know what else to say to you other than we need your support.
Well, we created the joint authority, you know, working with the city of Sioux City and you as a private citizen, because that was the means to build this project and work together with the city and meet safety needs for the police department. And it would be wrong if we didn't now come up and fund it some way, shape, or form, any way we can.
We had a recent authority meeting and Sheriff Sheehan was there and he talked at length about where we would be if something happens to that building next door with regard to not just correcting the problem, but the costs of having to transport prisoners and house those prisoners in other jails. We're looking at big dollars, and I just ask all of the supervisors to look hard at that. And again, we want to move forward. We're ready to move forward, but we need your support. And I thank you for looking at it.
Isn't this piece of that 150 pages what we're researching to see if we can in fact use it
that's
for
one.
this purpose?
That's one issue. We've, like Dennis was talking, we sent that, Dennis and Shane, I believe, sent the letters off to our 2 senators and our 1 congressman to try and get some firmed up answer. And again, this is an information item. We're not voting on anything tonight, but I guess time is of the essence, and we're just hoping we can get some kind of answers back in a timely fashion to basically, and to answer Mr. Moore's concerns. Obviously, he's on the legal side of this. He wants guarantees that we can do this without digging ourselves into a hole we can't come back out of. And speaking as board chairman, not as an authority chairman, because that's not my position, but as a board chairman, I asked the county attorney's office this afternoon what language is holding us to which bid we have to take. And I don't know if you've come up with an answer yet, because Mr. Jennings said he was going to talk to you. Do you have anything firm yet that you would like to address?
I don't think that we have a firm answer on that. PJ and I discussed it briefly. Ultimately, I think that the county has to concur with the award of the bid, but ultimately the authority awards the bid. So that may be a discussion that needs to happen with the authority's attorney as well, as far as what the options are with the bids that have been put forth. Mark, you referenced looking into the rules, and I was going to bring that point up as well. I think a couple weeks back, Dennis asked about the possibility of getting an attorney's opinion on kind of the parameters for how the funds can be used. And we've had some discussions on that. I think that given that the rules are new, they've changed a few times since they put forward the interim rules, and they were very long. And someone with specific expertise should probably be asked to do that. So if there is a request for an opinion, we would ask, we would refer to outside counsel on that. I'm not sure if there's a firm out there that, you know, how far out on a limb somebody wants to go, because a lot of the rules are still, well, they're interim rules now, the final rule's not out, so it's hard to give a conclusive answer. And that's something Dennis and I discussed as far as when we talked about what would we get from an outside opinion. If we spend the money on an opinion and the answer that comes back is it depends or maybe, you know, that doesn't help us a lot.
Well, you talk about getting hung out to dry. If we commit 10 million to this project and they say, no, we're really in trouble. We got to come up with 10 million.
Right. Well, and some of the indications that we've had, you know, based on the interim rules that are out there, is that the sorts of things that the interim rules are geared towards are maybe a little bit different than the overall project that we have. Now, if there's pieces of the project that can fit in there, I mean, I think that's what we're looking at. But overall, it's not, the COVID money's not designed to replace an old jail.
One thing I probably don't have to remind the board of is, yes, that's a very big risk of reallocating that large sum of money. You have to weigh your risks. You also have a risk of how long you're going to let that current jail operate before something does happen, and if it does, what the cost associated with that risk will be as well.
I mean, just the dollar risk of letting something happen across the street is bigger than the $15 million difference. I mean, if you're just rolling the dice.
Ernie Colt, 4526 Perryway. We heard a number of $6 million thrown out in costs to house all the inmates elsewhere for 365 days. What HVAC system would take 365 days to fix, though? At most, 90 days is what we're talking about. What system failure would require a move out? Only one in the middle of the summer or middle of the winter. Even then, they make temporary HVAC units that are on semi-trailers that can connect into their existing duct system to care of things temporarily. The unit should be properly maintained. You should know what the true risk of the failure is. If maintained properly, you're not going to have a full system failure. You're going to have components that fail. Also, a rebid adds 3 to 4 months to the project, 6 months tops. You've got that risk anyhow for the next 20 months during construction. Could happen tomorrow. So this isn't an added risk. We've been dealing with this for years. Use this as a reason not to take a few months to rebid is unjustified. Worst case, you could say his risk is extended for 3 months, which then, based on Chad's math, is only $1,500,000 in extra cost should the worst case scenario happen. And we've already identified $3 million in value engineering on this project. That's money that Woodbury County can recuperate if we get to work. It's not going to be recuperated if someone else gets it out of state. I think it's crazy that we're even considering this. It's all of our tax dollars. The COVID dollars are taxpayers' dollars. The bond referendum's taxpayer dollars. We want to give it all away? It's crazy, you guys.
Anybody else have any comments for our item tonight? We did not. Any other comments on item 13? Any other comments on item 13, Dennis?
Yeah, one thing that we have to remember, and I think the government's got to remember too, that the design of the actual jail, the interior guts of this was done during COVID, designed to help prevent future problems as COVID has caused. I think that's a huge point. This wasn't designed before COVID hit, it was designed after COVID hit. Yes, they had preliminary plans, but not the detail, not the 260-some pages worth of detail. So that presents an even stronger case there that this was designed during COVID and designed to prevent a problem like this ever happening where we have to let prisoners out on the street, the courts couldn't send prisoners to jail, couldn't do work release, couldn't do anything. Monitoring is tough because of COVID. So that directly impacts some of the decisions U.S. Treasury's got to look at. This was done during COVID, not preliminary COVID, trying to adjust an aging jail that's a problem. And they can verify that.
Well, even with the, and this is not, it's an information item, we're obviously not going to vote on it tonight, but even with the designs designed in of the pandemic issues, these costs weren't figured in or designed in either. So, I mean, we're sitting here with a situation that is kind of like a dumpster fire on a train wreck with something else going on at the same time, and it's beyond our control, and it's a very uncomfortable place to be.
There's been discussion of value engineering independent of a rebid, as far as I'm aware. Are there guarantees? It's being spoken of like there's a guarantee that the costs are going to go down by millions of dollars if there's a rebid. And we faced the prospect of waiting before, and waiting obviously didn't lower the price.
Shane Albrecht, Bacon Green. One of the value engineering things that we've been looking at is over $1 million worth of savings in removing the seismic stuff on this. We're pretty sure that Henry Henschel will give us a variance for that number. So am I confident that we can come up with some of that number? That's, yes. Just from that piece alone, we already have in writing from Henry before that he didn't see a need for the seismic bracing. So yes, I've seen numbers, so yes, I am confident that we can get you at least over $1 million in that piece.
Right.
Okay?
How does anyone feel about a rebid coming back with, I mean, are we going to be cutting corners and making the same mistake with the current jail just to build under a certain dollar amount, irrespective of what the reality is, that we need to have a jail?
I think
People don't have to have, this is what gets me, is people don't have to have a jail in their own home. If lumber prices go up and a taxpayer says, I can't afford this thing now, they're not going to build a new addition, they're not going to update their HVAC, but they don't have to, by law, house prisoners and find a place for them to stay when their heater's getting redone or the air conditioner's getting redone. That's just not the world that we live in here on the county board. So I understand the whole, I have to cut my budget and the county should cut their budget. And we do that. We've done that for several years in a row. We've lowered the tax base for several years in a row, but the average American home is not required to house prisoners. So I just think that needs to be understood here. This is not a discretionary purchase. This is not something where we just hem and haw for years and talk about the perfect, the absolute perfect situation that's going to surround every aspect of the building. This is a process that began on my first year on the board. It began as an expansion project, then a modernization project, and finally a new building project. And all along the way, there's been public input. All along the way, we've been working with excellent partners like the Baker Group on other projects. And It just rubs me the wrong way when we, just dumbing down and oversimplifying of, well, someone knew someone in town, so that's why we gave them the project. This is a big deal. This is something we've been working on for years. And this is something that judges have come down and said we need. Law enforcement comes down and said we need. The sheriff says we need, both sheriffs. The county board, Republican, Democrat, going back 6 years. This is not something that we just are arguing about the color of the siding on our house. This is something that we have to provide. Sorry.
And I just think that, you know, what expert out there says waiting 3 months is going to be a good deal 4 months from now? I see no prices going down in my industry. They just keep going up. That was my fear, back in February when we talked about delaying it back then. I know we had no other identified sources of revenue, but I mean, who knows what waiting those 3 months could have cost. So we can't kick the can down and rebid and have it come back 60 million. It's just unreasonable to even make that assertion. There was an open bid process. The lowest bidder gets the bid in my book. That's just the way it is. And from what I saw and a lot of the information in there, there is a lot of local workforce going into that project and a lot of the same local subs throughout the bids. There will be local people getting some of that piece of the pie, so to speak, as the term was given, I think. So I think we, as the Board of Supervisors, need to do the best we can to identify sources of either reduced expense or new revenue or potential revenue and move forward like we said we would.
There is another issue. If you do reject the bids, you bid it out again, I think we have to downsize the project by a certain percent. Is that true? I've heard 10%.
And we're looking into that.
And that's the last thing we want to do is downsize the project and end up what we got across the street.
We're looking into all the requirements of that depending on when the rejection is. I'm not legal counsel, so I'm not going to advise on that. I want to make sure. I've put a call into Maria Brownell, which is the Allers and Cooney lady that works with Jason Kaminsky, to give me an opinion on this whole thing so that we can present it to you in a written document to the authority, who can then share it with the supervisors as well.
What I can say about a rebidding process, in my opinion, it's usually a train wreck. I say that because the bid numbers are out. The subcontractors know what the numbers were for plumbing, electrical, HVAC. So now a standard has been set because they know what those prices were.
If they bid at all a second time.
If they bid it all a second time. And so usually your numbers just increase because everyone knows what the numbers are. That's just the fact of the game. As Matthew said, I've been working on this basically since my employment with Woodbury County, which is a little over 6 years. And it's continued to be nonstop. And of late, it probably takes 80% of my work time when I should be focusing on other building services functions. I'm energetic enough to put in the time that's necessary to take care of those functions, but as the authority heard me be pretty outspoken in their last meeting, I'm growing tired of it. And I'll express the same thing here. I've put in so much time and so much effort, and it just seems like it's been, as Rocky said, one frustration after another to try to get this thing off the ground. Another thing that everyone should continue to be focused on is that the authority has already approved contracts for site work and the detention equipment. So that is going to be paid for, and it's going to come no matter what.
You know, Kenny, that brings up the question, so who would have locally provided detention equipment?
There's no one who locally that could have provided to meet the specifications that we are requiring.
Can somebody break down for us, if we're going to go with these people south of us, the subs that are local and not local, so we have an idea of.
I don't think we can discuss that legally, who they are, what
We can't?
amount of subs until a bid is accepted.
Okay.
But I can point out that there are, we just can't say what dollar amount, which.
From what we understand, that a majority of the subcontractors are local.
The potential subs and suppliers were presented to the authority in an open meeting last Thursday. Those are not guarantees, but those are the potential subs and suppliers. So that list has been made public as part of the open meeting requirements, because that list was presented, just so everybody.
Well, I'm just going to say, just for sake of brevity, if you would like the information, reach out to Shane and/or Kenny and get the information from them rather than hash it out here in the meeting.
Send me a copy.
It makes little sense to me. Sheriff, would you say your piece, please?
I just wanted to respond and I guess on record. The numbers that Ernie was referencing during the Law Enforcement Center Authority meeting that I gave were exactly worst-case scenarios. If you're asking the sheriff's office to house as many as 234 people at $75 a day for 365 days a year, the math comes out to about 6.4 million. I am not an air handling expert or a systems expert or anything, so I have no idea whether we'd be down for 90 days or 180 days. But the additional expense with doing something like that, even if we move only half of the people, the largest jails in the state of Iowa, when we had checked into it months ago, this would have even been prior to me being sworn in as sheriff, I think Polk County said that they would take 10 of our inmates. Lynn County said they would take 8 to 10 of our inmates, which means if we would be doing onesie, twosies, and threesies in 50 or 60 counties around the state of Iowa. And logistically, it would be an absolute nightmare. You're talking we would have to probably take deputies off the road, off of patrol, and put them into transport so that they could transport people all over the state of Iowa, literally on a daily basis. And we haven't even put pen to paper on what the expenses of that would possibly be. But what I wanted to say, and to get on record, my numbers were in no way an argument to either accept or deny the bid or anything. That's outside my scope of responsibility. That's the responsibility of the Law Enforcement Center. So I just don't want it mischaracterized that I was arguing one way or the other. That's not my responsibility. I don't think it's not my say. I will argue that we need this facility, as Matthew said. It's different if I want to do an addition on my home. You're right. I can say, look, but the sheriff is required to provide jail space. We're required to serve papers. There's certain things that there's an obligation. So I just want to put a little more context to what that conversation was about, and that it wasn't an argument one way or the other to accept or reject the bid. I think everybody's understanding that we would like to keep the money local. But as you said, there was a bidding process, and I think the chairman brought it up in the meeting. If there's a legal way to take care of it or address it, tell us. And I don't want to put words in.
And that is, not to override what you're saying, but that is what I asked the county attorney's office this afternoon to look at, because.
Well, they can't come back after the fact and lower their bid by $1 million. That's,
Well, where'd Shane go? There he is. Please don't. I'm just saying that there's been some innuendo or some rumors floating around, and I asked Shane to look into those, and for the moment, I think they're just rumors and innuendo, so I'm gonna leave them alone. There's no reason to bringing them up here. Again, this is an information item. I wish that Local 948 was still here to listen to some of this. I understand they're upset. I'm not happy about that in any way, shape, or form. Speaking on a personal level, I'd just as soon keep Woodbury County money in Woodbury County and Iowa at second choice. I don't know if there's anybody much more vocal than me on that, but enough said. And I see you gentlemen sitting here, I don't know what issue you might be wanting to address. Is this one of them?
We're from Housing and Construction. We were just asked to be here in case there were questions. That's something that we had to address.
Okay.
We don't have anything formal to present.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Sure.
If I could just, so at least from my perspective, I'd urge the authority to accept one of the bids. We haven't, as a board, as a county, we didn't anticipate. I mean, I know the way some people talk, they knew everything. They knew there was going to be a COVID pandemic. They knew exactly when prices were going to go up. They just knew everything. They told us afterwards, but they knew everything. So we didn't know that. We also did not know that we were going to get these ARPA funds. And that's, if that wasn't coming, I don't know what we'd be doing. So those are two things we couldn't control. The one thing we can control, as long as we move forward with a bid, is to do some long-term planning. And if we don't move forward, then we're not going to be able to do long-term planning, because what we would end up with would be a lesser product that would not fulfill the promises we made in the bond referendum to last at least 30, 50 years.
I started dealing with this a long time ago. Larry Goldberg, spent a lifetime with him trying to figure out how to make that box over there work. And his recommendations were incredibly expensive. The thing that scares the hell out of me is that for so many years, we've tried to get a new jail, and we've got a hold of the ring, and I hope we don't drop it, because we're so close. We've got a bond issue. We've got all the pieces coming together, and to all of a sudden just let her drop out the bottom is heartbreaking. We got to do everything we can to make it work. Some of the people aren't going to like. Some of the people are going to like. And the other thing that I will never vote for is to dummy down what we're doing. Hello, next door. I was in school business for years, and I saw school districts take the old scissors and cut the bottom of the page off. One school district cut out all the cabinets. So every classroom had no cabinets. Yikes. And I don't think they have them yet, because you can't fix that. You can't go back. So, and I think we need all the alternates. I'm done.
One more thing, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
As to the risk of using ARPA funds, I understand that there's not 100% certainty, but I think that given the scope and the length of time we have to allocate these funds, which is 5 or 6 years, last I heard, that we would satisfy whatever parameters there are. I'm fairly confident of that, whether it's mental health staffing, space, responding to a pandemic by having space, the fact that there's segregated air handling units and zones. All these things are related to the intent of the legislation, and if one doesn't stick, I'm sure another one will. This is a big enough project where there's enough of these things that we're going to be spending money on staff and materials-wise, and if, like I said, if the mental health avenue doesn't work, there's cost increases due to COVID. I don't think that waiting until we have an attorney that's going to give us an ironclad opinion is going to turn out well, because we may never get it. We face that a lot of times, that question, do we move forward when we have 1,000% certainty, or do we just proceed as reasonable people and rely on the intent of the law, which is to help a situation like this.
You know, and a lot of my experience of dealing with this kind of stuff too is that you could ask 5 different attorneys and get 5 different opinions. So, no offense. Oh, no offense to you too.
Well, again, as this is a information item, we're not going to make any votes on this. I just, to segue from what Mr. Ung was saying, that I'm almost at the point where, and referencing Mark as well, we finally got a hold of something concrete, if not approaching quicksand at the moment, but it'd just kill me to get this close and then fail on this, but it's just unbelievable that the amount of frustration that the authority has looked at. And getting back to what Matthew said, I think we almost have to take a swing and gamble a little bit. And
Well, to say, you know, the roll of the dice doesn't seem like that big a risk to me. And this is, again, for those public numbers, we're 15 million over, you know, you can value engineer out that seismic stuff. We're not going to have the earthquakes. You know, if you say maybe a $13 million difference here is what we're going to ask for, maybe 12 by the time we get some other little funding sources in there. Our last bid on the repair of the building across the street was, you know, 20 million in estimates. Now, that was what, 5 years ago, 4 years? I mean, how long ago was that study done now? And, you know, what was the increases for HVAC in this project? So it was 7 years ago. So now, 2017. Okay, so yeah, almost 5 years ago. Yeah, and so, those are going to be 30, 35 million now. Those haven't gone down, they've gone up as well. So we're going to roll the dice or we're not, but if we don't do anything, we got a guaranteed 30 to 35 million across the street, and we gain no new revenue, we gain no new capacity. We end up with the same problem. So we need to just move forward, and I think we expect the help from the ARPA funds.
And those numbers across the street does take a bond referendum, which,
Good luck now.
yeah.
Larry Goldberg did, back in 2017, did do projections that went into, or I should say went out to farther years. In other words, how long you delay your project when we were looking at doing something at the current LEC then. And so we do have probably some older information that shows what those projections would be or how they increase, but they certainly wouldn't have COVID-19 involved with them. But one thing we haven't discussed here tonight, we've talked a lot about expenditures and costs. We haven't talked anything about projected revenues. And, you know, if we did get a facility up and off the ground with 400 beds or larger, there's a great possibility that we could certainly increase our revenues to offset all of those costs easily.
Again, as this is an information item, we're not going to solve anything tonight. Is there anything that anybody would like to add very briefly? I think we've covered just about everything that we can cover. I don't want it to turn emotional and mad. A little late for that on one angle, but
I think we kicked the can far enough down the road.
item 14, Board Administration, update on tax rates and budget due to mental health funding. Dennis?
Okay, Matthew requested this last week, and I did include your board packet, that the mental health funding is actually going to have, with a decrease coming up for the current year coming up, fiscal year 22, our tax rate will drop by 35 cents for the mental health services, which inevitably will reduce our overall tax rate increase by 15 ten thousandths of a cent. which you may say we've held the line. And that includes paying for our new bond issue for $25 million. Before it was up because of the bond, so now it is down. Yes, we're using mental health funding to offset the increase in debt service, but the point is, it's something that's out of our control, but does reduce our tax rate basically to zero. And I have gone to the second page where it does show how it affects residential houses, commercial, industrial, and ag lands throughout the county. They have dropped dramatically from what they were before the mental health decrease. And a point in case, next year, it's gonna drop 40 cents more because they're taking over total funding. So next year, our second bond issue of 25 million, the 40 cents will more than cover that. So if we freeze, propose, we freeze the rates like we have in the past, we could have a tax rate decrease, yet we funded the jail for both issues. So with, for 22-23, we'll probably be able to hold the line. For 23-24, that's when the federal prison starts kicking in, and that's going to be dedicated 8% to tax rate reduction on debt service and 20% into basically a maintenance sinking fund.
Just to rephrase what you just said, we're going to get a brand new jail and people's taxes are going to go down potentially, is what you just said, in a few years.
Yeah, because of mental health relief.
The future is looking very, very rosy if we stay the course.
So the timing of this mental health relief is very good for our case, basically. Now, other counties will have a tax decrease because they aren't building a new jail. We are, and the public voted for it. But it's going to be able to be offset. The first year comes on, the second year, both of them come on. The third year, we'll start reducing the tax rate.
A lot has to go right, but if it goes right, that's very, very
There it is.
good-looking picture.
Dennis, is there anything else that will affect this countywide tax rate of 7.16519 between now and the time property tax bills go out?
No.
So this is
Because
the,
on the commercial or industrial, in Woodbury County, they are taking a reduction for our next year. And after that goes down $214,000 for our 5 tax funds, which is minimal. So it won't have a great effect. It may vary about 3.5 cents per thousand, but for the coming year, the rollback, state clawing back, it won't affect us for the next fiscal year. The second one, yeah, will affect us a little bit. But we may have by then, 22, 23, more revenue coming in to offset the decrease in commercial rollback.
right. But this is, but this rate is set, so we've,
Yes, yes. We should be getting notified by the department management because they're instructed to adjust what we send into the state, adjust the rates in the tax askings.
well, that's pretty incredible that we have a flat tax rate from the last year.
How do we do it?
We got
It
lucky.
was all part of the plan, Rocky.
We just keep doing it.
But we got lucky, but now if we are skilled going forward, we can keep looking at it.
Justin, we planned it.
We knew.
Yeah, we knew.
Any other questions for Mr. Butler on the item 14? Reports on committee meetings.
None?
I had some, but nothing to really report.
Fellas? I'm trying to think, was the Rolling Hills meeting, okay, that was post. We chose to bump our offer up a small amount for the crisis center up on Division Street. Have not heard anything back from any directors there. Once again, this is probably not the best time to be getting into real estate, but there was some language, talk, if you will, of finding out a way to perhaps purchase it, because some of the money that's going to be sitting in the Rolling Hills budget will have to be spent down, or it will be clawed back by the state, and I was a little confused on how all that, excuse me, the numbers, but regardless, and then perhaps strike a deal with one of the providers and see if we could get something maintained that way. Item 16, citizen concerns. Would you have something, Sheriff? Had something kind of newsworthy over the weekend?
Yes, and maybe all the board is aware, but we had a homicide in Luton yesterday, around 1:32 yesterday afternoon. comm center started receiving 911 calls in reference to a shooting with possible victims down. Upon arrival, actually Sergeant Bluff PD also responded with us, and deputies, upon their arrival, they found a female who was wounded from gunfire in extremity, and a male party who was found deceased in the front yard. We identified him today. The male victim was 40-year-old Russell Landon Moore of rural Mapleton, who succumbed to the injuries from the shooting that occurred yesterday. And then approximately 1:48, a witness had called in. I should back up and say during the initial call, callers gave a possible suspect vehicle description. And several minutes later, around 1:48 p.m., a witness called saying that they had seen that vehicle or a vehicle matching that description traveling south on Highway 75. And Sergeant Tadlock, who had been called out from home, was responding to the call and spotted the vehicle and made a traffic stop on it on Highway 141 just east of Highway 75. And that vehicle was occupied by one male party who was later identified as the person responsible for doing the shooting. So within 16 minutes, we had the suspect in custody. And he was charged with going armed with intent and second-degree murder, and that suspect was identified as Marvin Lynn Hildreth, Jr., age 20, from rural Whiting. The female victim is not being identified at this time as a victim. We're going to respect her privacy right now. We have not identified her. It's still an ongoing investigation, and we're continuing to work it. They worked late into the hours last night. We're up early this morning, serving search warrants throughout the day. And just wanted to thank Sergeant Bluff PD, Salix Fire and Rescue, Monona County Sheriff's Office, and the Woodbury County Attorney's Office for assisting in this unfortunate circumstance, but a positive resolution for us and for the public that really nobody was in danger, just because of how quickly this person was captured, and gives me an opportunity to, sing the praises of the people that work for the Sheriff's Office and are working in law enforcement, who, when that 911 call comes in and there's bad things happening, we go no matter what. And so I'm very proud of our staff, and thought you all should know. We were able to also set up a phone number through WCICC. We have implemented a new phone number for our investigations unit. It'll be just a general number. It's not something that will be answered, but it's a voicemail box. And that number is 712-224-3333. So 224-3333. And when we have large crimes, we'll probably start using that number as a way for people to call in to one number, so that our detectives can get that information quickly. It sends an email to their email, and then we can do follow-up in a really timely fashion. So just wanted to make you all aware of that. So, any questions for me about that?
Good job.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Board concern, or I'm sorry, anybody else with citizen concerns? Board concerns. Mr. Butler.
Just one item, we did rebid CIP loan for interest rates because they cannot be bank qualified, they're just federal tax exempt. The low bid came in at 8.84%. We'd estimate during budget time it'd be 2.5% because we didn't know back in February. So what that does over the period of 5 years will save us an interest cost of $1.895,000 divided over 5 years. So with that interest rate gives us a hope when we redo, we go out to bid on this next bond issue, it's going to be very low compared to what the original estimates were. So it's good news. We are working on, as we speak, we're working on a road project bond issue. That's one thing, hiring the underwriter like we did tonight. Same underwriter we used for the first $25 million. We're getting a bond rating from a different company because we feel we should have a higher bond rating than what we received. If it's lower, we can still use what we got, but they feel we'll have a higher bond rating, which will help the sale of our bonds. The one thing that does hurt our sale of the bonds coming up for our $25 million is what happens with COVID. If there's slight risk, they'll have to write a disclosure in the bond opinion to, when they sell the bonds, that there is some risk there using COVID money. So the sooner we get an answer on this from somebody, give some, more life to it and make it at least 98% sure, it'll help us in our bond too. So that's where we're at.
Thank you.
Yep.
I just have a procedural question related to our prior discussion for Joshua maybe. Does the county board potentially need to act on allocating ARPA funds before the authority could accept a bid, or could they do that before?
Some of that will depend on what the authority is looking for as far as assurances. I mean, ultimately, the funding is going to come from the county, so my guess would be is that they would want action from the board saying, yes, that money's going to come, whether it's the ARPA funds or somewhere else. But once the bid is accepted, the county's committed to that money, whether it's ARPA or somewhere else.
Okay.
And there's 30 days to accept the bid, so that's, we probably won't have the full answer on the ARPA within that time frame.
We are adjourned.